Midday, Kris. Hello.
Happy noon hour.
Happy noon hour. Yes. I always love lunching with you,
Oh, thanks.
even if it's on screen here. So for any of you that might be seeing this in replay mode, this is our virtual version of Please Welcome. All right, it just pushed it live, so that's how I know. So we are in our virtual version of Please Welcome. We're going to hang here for a minute or so to let our virtual audience jump in. And then we've got a fabulous conversation queued up.
Yes, we do.
And there'll be certainly opportunities for people to drop questions into the chat. But so hello, Kris. We are in Bloomington, Minnesota, for those of you tuning in with us today.
It's a gorgeous spring day, and we're going to have a fun conversation.
Yes, we are. I think spring has sprung.
Finally. If you're in Minnesota, you know what we mean.
Yeah, well, McKenna and I were talking this morning. We've brought out our open-toed shoes now, so that is the sure sign that we are in spring. So very, very exciting.
And mine stay out and through November, and I get comments every year, but I have a hard time putting them away.
You're a true Minnesotan.
Yes, I am.
I think that's what that means. All right. So I have high confidence that LinkedIn has pushed this out. I'm hoping that the other social channels have as well. So we might as well go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Please Welcome. That's how I always love to start off these events, whether we're virtual or in person. We launched this series in August of 2022. We launched it as a studio audience experience. We welcomed Denise Soler-Cox. She was our first guest on our stage. We welcomed Daryl Davis to the stage as well. And then we launched the virtual version on March 29th. And it was at that time that I interviewed you, Kris.
I know.
Interviewed Kris. We chatted a little bit about why we created Please Welcome. You answered questions about what's happening in the world of speakers and entertainment, who's hot right now, what drives her process. And so you can see all of our past episodes of Please Welcome over on our website, heroic-productions.com. There is a drop down for Please Welcome. So go check out those past events. They're all wonderful. While you are over there, you can also learn a little bit more about Heroic. We are a full service event production company. Our work takes us all over the world. This month alone, we've been in Las Vegas, we've been in London, we've been in Atlanta. I'm sure I'm missing a few. I'll be in Orlando next week with one of our speakers. So if you are an event professional, if you are a corporate executive, you need to know more about us. So thank you for being here today. Kris, I want to welcome you. Kris Campbell is our VP of Speakers and Entertainment. It's always a pleasure to share the screen with you. Our featured guest is backstage, but before we introduce him, why don't you tell us a little bit about what is next for
in May, really coming up quick. In May, on May 18th to be exact, we'll have Dr. Luana Marquez in our Studio 15 here in Bloomington, Minnesota. She's going to be speaking about organizational and team mindsets surrounding anxiety. Dr. Luana is a Harvard psychologist with a new book we're excited about. It's also coming out in May, and it's called The Bold Move, A Plan to Transform Anxiety into Power. It's honestly a read you kind of can't put down, and so applicable immediately, stuff we all need right now. To give you a little idea of the excitement around this book, I pulled a Dan Pink testimonial for it. Listen to this. If you're timid when you should be tough and resigned when you should be resolute, this book is the antidote. Dr. Luana helps us break from limiting patterns and create a life of meaning and purpose. So I'm just telling you, do your best to get to this. Number one, the studio experience is kind of mind-blowing. If you can't make it or you're in a different part of the country, don't fear. We record these wonderful things, and you'll be able to catch it later on. We'll have ways for you to sign up for that.
Amazing. So, and let me just say one other thing too. The whole purpose here of Please Welcome is that we're presenting to you speakers and entertainers who are available for corporate events. The whole mission here is that we can help fuel your strategies. We can help you create even better events, and we do that by highlighting these amazing talents that are out there.
Yeah, we show off a little bit too with our own production, but we also give you a chance to see them in a light before you hire them, ask your own questions of them, see them as real people, you know, not just demo videos that you are supposed to trust. So, I mean, I personally appreciate that part of it. All right, enough about that. Let's focus on what let's talk about what we're going to focus on today, which is building meaningful relationships in this new world of work. It's something a lot of people are talking about for a very good reason. We've heard the term quiet quitting, the great resignation. Those terms all refer to a real problem that's impacting our workplaces right now, and certainly the future of work. We're dealing with a lack of meaningful human connection. I don't know if you've noticed, but I certainly have.
Yeah.
Loneliness has been a universal challenge for leaders trying to create connected cultures in our hybrid reality. Our guest today is an expert on human connection. He's a 17-year television host and best-selling author of the book, Every Conversation Counts: The 5 Habits of Human Connection That Build Extraordinary Relationships. Through his work, Riaz has learned one valuable lesson, and I just love this. We're always one conversation away from a completely different life. Please welcome Riaz Meghji.
Yay.
Hey.
Welcome.
So awesome to be here. And hey, I got the Spring is Sprung wardrobe memo, so I can bring up the color saturation.
Yes.
We got a virtual rainbow.
We're very colorful.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Hey, Riaz, I'm going to jump right in because I think we're going to have not enough time for all the questions we're going to have of you. But during the pandemic, I think we all experienced that lack of human connection. Actually, it sort of snuck up on me, if I'm being honest, and not in a good way. I also think many of us didn't realize that we were substituting other things to make us feel better, which kind of blew my mind. And I think it took somebody pointing it out before I really realized I was doing that. And I think I read or heard you say, so if I have this wrong or you're quoting somebody or whatever, then correct me, but human connection isn't an option. It's a necessity. And boy, we find that out. It seems like such a powerful statement, but it also seems so obvious. Like, I think even though it's obvious, we need a reminder, a big one right now. Instead of, I think, I'm just going to stop. Instead of listening to me any further, what would you share with us for a little bit and just sort of tease some of your ideas up? And then Kitty and I are going to dive into some of our questions. Like I said before, we have a bunch.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for the invitation to be here. And that statement is really the core of this work. I believe, like, in the last 3 years, we went back to basics on what it meant to show up for each other and what it means to connect on a human level. And maybe it's something that we all took for granted pre-pandemic.
I think so.
With all of the events going on. And this point of human connection, I believe this is the catalyst. Meaningful connection is the catalyst to build thriving workplace cultures in this changed world. I mean, when I talk to leaders now and we have the opportunity to collaborate with events, here's what I'm hearing from leaders. And if you're in the chat, just drop a yes or talk about your points of friction with connection, because we want to learn from you as well.
Yeah.
Leaders are telling me they have more work, more responsibilities than they've ever had before. So volume goes up. They're telling me in a hybrid work setup, they're siloed. Different teams have different priorities. So then you get overloaded in the project management side and forget about the connection piece.
Right.
We consider new employees that were onboarded in the past couple of years where you've never even met them in person. And that lack of connection impedes the ability to really collaborate in effective ways. And the timing of this conversation is interesting because, Kris, I appreciate your honesty. At the core, we have the mental health conversation coming out of the disruption of these past 3 years of that loneliness driven by isolation, where people experience stress, anxiety, and depression. And it's funny, when you talk about connection pre-pandemic, I would approach this idea and present it to companies, and they'd say, Riaz, that's great. You got anything on change, disruption, innovation? And now I believe they've understood. I mean, I credit Cigna, the research that they've done, taking a look at the fact that loneliness is costing companies in the US $154 billion a year in lost productivity due to stress-related absenteeism. Like lonely workers, twice as likely to take a sick day compared to connected workers, 5 times as likely to miss work due to stress. All of these factors, one, show the responsibility of leadership to prioritize your people's well-being and the opportunity to look at how do we create connected cultures so we can truly, truly win together.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That's shocking.
I know. Well, I mean, this is an important topic and we've all seen it, we're starting to see it more and more. Like you said, these conversations about our mental health that I don't think I ever had in the workplace before are showing up surprisingly often.
Yeah.
And so obviously we've hit on something here. And I know you have so much to say about this. Is it okay if we ask you a few questions now, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
Fire away. I know you have got questions for the audience tuning in live. We'd love to see your questions as well.
Yes, please do.
The interesting part of every experience of doing this work is Heroic Productions is the company that creates the experience. Speakers such as myself, when I'm given the invitation to participate, I always love to listen in to one point that I hadn't thought about yet to evolve this message. So as much as we want to present ideas, we want to hear them from the audience too. So by all means, fire away.
I love hearing that because I love speakers who always remember that it's about the audience, and you clearly do. What are some things we can do to build trust and create safe environments for our teams and to share more openly with each other? That's come up for us here, I know.
This is a great and valuable point to introduce, especially when we could come in with the purest intention to connect with our teammates and build this, collaborative culture. But some people have barriers up. Mm-hmm. And I think the starting point to create a safe environment is the intention to just meet people where they are at. Because Katie, your definition of what safe looks like would be different from Kris's definition, would be different from mine. So if we're pausing and having that clear intention to understand, hey, Katie, what is it that makes you feel safe? Kris, how do you like to be supported? I see Nikki in the chat. Nikki, how do you like to communicate? Is it text? Is it virtual? Is it in person? And understand and almost create this charter of trust where there's no one size fits all, especially in a hybrid reality. It's taking the intention to understand our people. Mm-hmm. And a simple approach is, hey, look at you is so much greater than look at me. Mm-hmm. And once we understand our people, and the big opportunity and point I hear from leaders is, Riaz, I'm exhausted. Like, I feel like I need to be a therapist now with all of the issues that come in. There are a new set of challenges. And I think the opportunity is for leaders, you're not just managing roles and responsibilities, you become managers of energy now. And that's in person, that's hybrid, which takes a lot more effort. So understanding who our people are, what they need, and asking what makes you feel safe to ask the question first, and then understand how we can really lean in and support them.
Right.
So is this just a one-on-one conversation with that leader and each individual employee? I mean, that's one way, certainly. But that's also not possible for all leaders to be able to touch, and have that connection with each of their employees.
Yeah. I think the starting point, I believe the starting point is a one-on-one, but this is an excellent point. If you have a global company, you can only do so much if you have 100 reports. So as a leader in our meetings, if we're carving out spaces for connection off the top of our meetings, because I'm also a believer that efficiency can be the enemy of human connection if we're moving too fast. But Kitty, if you're running the meeting and you start by saying, okay, who's got a win from the past week that they want to celebrate? Hey, Kris, what made you smile this past week? You could have a fun icebreaker. One of my favorite icebreakers is like, okay, everybody shoot it out in the chat. What makes you boring? Instead of worrying about how you got to show up, how you got to impress each other, as a leader, going first and setting the tone of, this is a safe space. And in the group setting, if you're the leader and you go first with like, okay, I'll say what I think makes me feel boring. I love spreadsheets and I love watching WWE wrestling. My wife's like, you are a grown man. What are you doing? These are my things. These are my things. But if you are the leader opening up with that sense of vulnerability, honesty, and authenticity, you create a space for your people. And they may not do it right away because different cultures might be more reserved. That is okay. But our intention with consistency of showing up, going first, showing we trust them over time, they'll understand and begin to believe this is a safe space where they could show up as their true, authentic self.
Yeah. I think I was going to ask you how we make our small talk bigger, but I feel like you might have already addressed that a little bit. Is there anything else to say on that?
Yeah, with small talk, especially in this era,
we all do that, right? We all do that.
Yeah. Like this is such an interesting era that we're living through, not only the hybrid reality, but the AI reality. And if we want to make our small talk bigger, one of the ideas I recommend for leaders is ask questions that Chat GPT cannot answer. Because
I'm writing that down.
The AI will not replace human connection, but it will enhance it. Because what does AI provide? It provides perspectives that are already out there. But if we lean in with our curiosity and in the vein of making our small talk bigger, the quality of our questions will determine the depth of our connections. So I'm a big proponent of less information, more emotion. And I'll give you a quick example, especially if you have no context of the person in front of you. You show up at a networking event and you have this intention. You want to build rapport, you want to connect. The late psychiatrist Gordon Livingston did incredible work on the happiness equation. So he interviewed thousands and thousands of people and found the commonalities that really light people up. And he found the happiest people had three things in common. They had something to do, they had someone to love, and they had something to look forward to. So even if you don't have the gift of AI or having done the research beforehand, before an important pitch meeting or team meeting, if it's a blank canvas, ask them about what they're creating, ask them about the relationships that matter most to them, and then what are they excited about? What are they looking forward to really ignite that spark? And if we want to make our small talk bigger, ask the questions that will ignite their self-discovery. That's where we win. It's not about what we can say. I believe it's about what we can ask to unlock something in someone where they'll think, wow, I really love Kitty and Kris. It wasn't anything we said. It was just leaning in with that intentional curiosity.
Those are great questions. And I couldn't tell you when anybody had ever posed those questions to me. That's wonderful. It's just easy to say, oh, how are you? And then I think you always sometimes know, it's like, are they really asking me because they care? Or is it that's just something that people say? Those are great questions.
Well, Kitty, the response to that of how are you? And this is such a great example of how we can all break out of autopilot mode.
Yep.
Because what do we all say? Hey, how are you? Good, thanks. Next, you move on. There's no point of connection. But if we're the ones answering this question, I'll give you a scenario in my TV days. I'll never forget, before we went out in front of the cameras with this guest, we were just kind of sitting on the couch and I asked, how are you? And she smiled and she said to me, today, I'm feeling flawless. And I just looked at her. I'm like, damn, look at this. Look at this energy. This was infectious. But the way we answer the question, if we're getting an autopilot type question, what's the one word we could choose to break that autopilot mode? Maybe it's flawless, saying, hey, today, I'm feeling optimistic. I'm intrigued. Today, I'm struggling. If we give real responses, then we'll understand if that person really wants to connect with us, because we're breaking the script and offering up something that they could pick up or they could dismiss.
I love break the script. That's so powerful.
Yeah, always. Speaking of break the script, then, so one of the things that Kris and I talked about in preparing for the conversation today was the topic of appreciation. And so again, as we think about our corporate entities, our employee bases, we as leaders in companies, we always want to appreciate. People want to be appreciated, but it's not always executed very well. And I think that you have some thoughts on this. How do we miss the mark with appreciation? Because it's not that easy to do. It's not that easy to do it right.
Well, what's the most common way we can appreciate each other? Someone could be watching this broadcast and say to the three of us, hey, heroic. great job today. And we could say thank you, but what does that really mean? Like, what made it special for them? When I look at the opportunity for one of the habits of human connection I really champion is find ways to make people feel famous. And this is not in a superficial way. This is doubling down and aligning our appreciation with how they like to be recognized. And this could be the simple question of, when we talk about safety, how do you like to be supported? How do you like to be appreciated? And understanding, is it financial appreciation? Is it public recognition? Is it the opportunity with growth and new responsibilities? WorkHuman and Gallup did powerful research that they found when appreciation aligns with an employee's needs, they're 56% less likely to be a job seeker, 4 times as likely to be more engaged with their job, and 3 times as likely to be loyal to the organization. So as a starting point to be more intentional with our praise, I champion the idea of practicing specificity. So in the example of, hey, somebody watched this broadcast, if they said, Kitty, when you introduced this idea, it really made me reflect of how I can do things differently. Like, thank you for this. It's showing how specific that contribution is. It's being urgent, not waiting till like a big please welcome event or a big town hall. If you see it, spot it in the moment and say, hold on, what you just did there was a game changer, and here's why. It could be public, using all of the social media tools to celebrate one another, but above all, making it purposeful and let that person know that, hey, small wins, those are big wins. It doesn't have to be a huge milestone moment, but if you see something, this aligns with the purpose of the greater good that this team's trying to accomplish, thank you for the effort to show up in this intentional way. That specificity, I believe, is a powerful starting point.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm thinking, my brain, I'm having a hard time slowing it down right now because so many ideas are sparking. I was thinking about what happens when I feel recognized, but also when I feel heard. You know what I mean? Sometimes we're all racing so fast and you have something so important and you just know that nobody's really heard you yet. What are some of the ways we can all level up our listening skills? And maybe what's the first step? Again, I think I've thought about this a lot as an adult, and I've tried to be a better listener with my kids and now with my granddaughter, and it takes practice. But I'm wondering what you have to say about this.
Yeah, this is such an important one because let's be real, in this era of information, in this culture of convenience and efficiency, everything moves so fast. Our focus gets fragmented because we're bombarded with visual distraction, auditory distraction, technological distraction. The starting point that I believe can benefit us all is to ask ourselves and just observe how we listen. And I'll give you an example. If we're looking at conversations and looking at team dynamics, we could ask, hey, am I the critical listener that will ask those questions to spark a productive debate? Okay. Am I the more passive listener that just wants to consume, digest, take notes, and then come back? That could be fine. Or maybe I'm the relational listener that asks a lot of thoughtful questions because my goal is to build rapport and deepen the relationship, which could be powerful when you look at the return on relationships for culture and moving, the business forward. Understanding how you listen first is so important because then the next question is to understand how is that being received on the other side when somebody is sharing with you. Are they opening up more or are they closing off? And understanding how your listening language is being received on the other side is a great way to audit your awareness of how this connection is actually working. And when you see somebody really opening up, that is your indicator that how you're approaching them really works because every personality is different. And when I work with leaders, especially across the world and cultural differences, they can look at the way I present and say, in a different culture, wow, that guy's really animated. That's a bit too much for me. But on the other side, someone could look at a more reserved person saying, they're not really sharing a lot. I don't think they're interested. It could have nothing to do with that. It's just that is the difference in culture. So I think it's understanding the nuances of each culture, each personality, and then understand how you can calibrate your approach to really deepen the connection.
That's very wise. And I have taken note. I don't think I've thought about that enough.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So what are some of the common mistakes that you see people make when they set out to, you know what, I'm going to improve the connections that I make. I'm going to, you know, I think a lot of us have, since we've come out of this situation that we've been in, and you're interacting with people in person at the office through the small screen, etc., and we do strive to make more meaningful connections. What are some of the mistakes that you see people make?
The biggest one that I've observed is that we focused on fact instead of creating a feeling. And when we're trying to connect with our team, our intention is pure. We want to make a great first impression. We want them to trust us. And the trap we could fall into is we get into this laundry list of accomplishments of how great you are. Meanwhile, we forget about the feeling that we can ignite in that person. You know, one of the approaches to combat this mistake is to over-prepare, to improvise. And I'll give you an example. One of the biggest mistakes I made at the beginning of my career when I'd interview people on camera was I'd do all of this research, whether they had a book, a new album, you know, they had a TV show or a movie, and I'd come up with this checklist of questions that I thought were great to really put the spotlight on that person. And I'd evaluate the conversation of, hey, did I get the chance to ask all of those questions that I came up with? Slowly, I realized it isn't about that. It's about unlocking something that that person has yet to share. And that preparation will give us confidence walking into any conversation. But our ability to lean in, listen, and improvise, that's where real connection happens. And a simple question to unlock it, what I started doing is after we would exchange formalities is simply pausing and saying, hey, so Kris, what's on your mind? And the first thing that could come out of your mouth, Kris, allows me to understand that's the priority occupying your mental space. Then my opportunity is to prioritize your priorities and follow the leader. Because that first question, that's a great appetizer for the conversation, but the follow-ups, that is the main course where somebody gives you something that you didn't expect, and then you follow that narrative, and then you've come down this road of discovery where nobody knew that about this person, and they chose to open up to you. And, you know, a simple follow-up question, Kitty, if you're giving me, you know, something that I think is really powerful, I could pause and say, Kitty, like, do you mind if I take notes? Because I'm showing you, I think that is a great compliment to say, what you're sharing with me is so meaningful. And then when I follow up with you, Kitty or Kris, a week, a month, a year down the line, instead of saying, hey team, hope you're well, it's, hey team, remember what we discussed in Heroic Productions? You wouldn't believe what happened after that conversation. Boom, immediately it's a jump off point of a shared experience as opposed to just a generic follow-up.
That's amazing.
Everything that you're talking about here this morning hinges on being more present, clearly. It's active listening, and it's blocking things out when you're having the conversation to make that person feel like you're there with them. And that seems so easy, but it's so difficult.
It's a muscle.
It's right. Which is why what you talk about is so incredibly important, because it seems so easy, but it's difficult. And so we need these reminders, and we need techniques and exercises and all of those things. And that's what you speak about, and what you help companies bring into their organizations.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I appreciate you stamping that point. It can be incredibly profound to just show up and hold space for somebody. Because the set of challenges we're all in, look, I'm thinking about the month of May and appreciative of the fact the conversation around mental health is happening, where people can show up and talk about what's really going on.
Yeah,
It's hard. It's hard when you feel overwhelmed with responsibility and you might think, I'm the only one. And if I open up, am I going to disrupt and alienate myself from this group? Am I going to lose my sense of belonging? The leader that chooses to hold space and elevate that presence and give time, whether you have 5 minutes or 50 minutes, but just give that time and be consistent, that is going to build the trust and allow your team to thrive, knowing that you care about me. Because if they feel cared for, they will care more about showing up and being there for their teammates.
Right. Yeah. I feel like a lot of this brings up how important empathy is. Am I right about that?
Absolutely.
It's certainly something. It's funny because I find myself thinking about that and reading through a lot of your material, but also because it's something that I've been told that my whole life. But I also am really aware when I don't see it in someone and it's, kind of hurtful. I recently saw it in my little 9-year-old granddaughter, and I thought, look at that.
Oh.
She ran downstairs to make sure her grandpa had a special little stuffed animal because he didn't feel well. I'd spent 15 minutes with him, making sure that he knew she cared. So I've heard you talk about assertive empathy, and I'm thinking maybe that was what that was. But can you talk about how that can help us navigate difficult conversations?
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure. I want to make sure I get this piece.
It's assertive empathy is driven by empathetic curiosity. That empathetic curiosity can be a trust accelerator. And the research I found over the years, one of the most shocking findings was by Vital Smarts, a leadership training company, that 1 in 4 leaders puts off a difficult conversation for up to 6 months. 6 months.
Wow.
1 in 10, up to 2 years. So you can imagine the cultures of avoidance that are built when we talk about retaining top talent. That is going to be a huge impediment to building a culture of top performers. That difficult conversations, yes, they're uncomfortable, but if we avoid them, that is so much worse. And I think if we're going to be assertively empathetic, how can we lead with this sense of acknowledgement? Because what is empathy if we look at it? To me, connection and empathy really comes down to a reciprocity of authentic curiosity. And people on the other side, they are looking for a sense of acknowledgement. They are looking for a sense of appreciation. And above all, looking for a sense of acceptance that, hey, I'm going to show up. I might screw this up, but I'm here with a pure intent. So if we prioritize the relationship first and logic second, that's how we can begin to lead with assertive empathy and asking questions that really unlock where people are at, even when the conversation's difficult. Like if we have to relay negative news before, Kitty, you were going to give me a harsh critique. Before you jump in, you could simply ask, so Riaz, like, how do you feel that went? And allow me to voice my opinion on it. Maybe I'm stuck and you've got a client that is in a complete rut, or a teammate in a complete rut. And you could say, Kris, what do you feel is just impossible right now? And then give them the opportunity to reframe. Well, what would make it possible? And allow you to come up with the solutions. Because at the end of the day, people will support what they create. And then leading in with the sense of humility. Like, what is the difference between confidence and arrogance? I believe it's having a beginner's mind and asking these questions of, hey, Kitty, Kris, what's the question I fail to ask to understand your reality? Like, how could I show up for you in bigger ways? And then that person begins to understand, oh, wait a minute. Even though this is a difficult situation, this is the three of us versus the challenge instead of me versus you two. And that makes a big, big difference. If we look at conflict, I believe like very rarely is it about the conflict itself. More often than not, it's about the lack of acknowledgement surrounding the conflict. So if we can lead with this empathy to acknowledge where somebody's at, why they feel that way. Look, we're both on the same side trying to achieve something, but why do you feel differently about it? Here's how I feel differently. And then back it up with a healthy, productive dialogue. Empathy can unlock beautiful solutions, collaborations, and relationships.
That is such a bigger answer than I expected. And thank you.
Is that the cue? Like, okay, that was enough.
It's kind of
That's good.
Kind of what's been happening here. I'm like, oh my God, I thought it was good. You think you're halfway there, and it's like, whoa, I have a lot to learn.
Well, so much of the key of, let me rephrase, the key of so much of what you're saying is the phrasing of the questions. So we need to, it's the muscle memory, is getting these different ways of asking and answering questions into our vernacular so that they come from us easily. So there's some practice that we can all do on that. I'm writing down the questions and the responses that you're sharing with us. Before I'll give you
a simple framework to help with that as a starting point.
Oh, great.
So people don't get overwhelmed with what's the best question you can ask.
Yeah.
From interviewing thousands of people over the years, I found the questions that start with how and what elicit a more qualitative response as opposed to who, when, and where, which becomes factual. And then the conversation comes to a cold stop. Asking why becomes tricky. You know, we've heard Simon Sinek's work, which is phenomenal. Asking why can get to a deeper level of understanding, but could come across accusatory. So I've found how and what unlock wider responses that allow us to really dig in with the follow-up questions.
That's
so
helpful.
true. So true. Real quick before we pose the next question, I do want to acknowledge everybody who's tuning in with us today. Thank you for being here. Hi, Erin. Hello, McKenna. Hello, Nikki. You guys are the only people who've dropped a question. So even if you don't have a question, drop a message. Tell us where you're tuning in from, because we want to acknowledge you. We want you to know that you're here with us, and we're happy that you're here. So let's, sort of similar or on the same vein, let's talk a little bit about social media, because this is a topic that permeates pretty much everything. How do you, does social media help or hinder connection?
Good one.
The $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
I believe it's how you use it. And the approach that I believe that social media can be a tool for the greater good is leading with creation over consumption. Because it's so easy to get caught in the doom scroll that if we are consuming more on this platform where it's a passive approach, and then we fall into the comparison trap of, oh, well, Kitty's doing this in her life and Kris is living her best life over there in Minnesota. And then I start to feel insecure and isolated that I'm missing out. It can work against us. But if we're approaching it in the way of providing value, what we believe is valuable in our lives, in our subject matter, maybe sharing a piece of your personal life to just allow people to know what's happening with you in an authentic way, it can provide beautiful, beautiful connection. And even showing up on social media, maybe you're not posting, but you're actively commenting on other people's things. When we talk about appreciation and practicing specificity, it can be really powerful to show, hey, I appreciate the blog that you're putting out, the vulnerability that you're showing up with. It's making a difference in my life. And a bond could be built not by your post, but the actual commentary that you're providing. So I think it's how we're showing up and using the tool. And hey, let's be real. At the end of the day, if you just want to tune off, tune out, just getting intentional with an hour of just mindless scrolling. And just saying that's your vice for the day, but blocking that time that, hey, this was my time. I saw somebody say, McKenna said, hey, Real Housewives makes me boring. If that's your vice, lean into that.
Yeah.
But having those checkpoints, say, hey, this is my time to look at the memes and the videos that are going to make me smile and laugh. So I think it's controlling social media for a positive outcome, as opposed to falling into consumption and allowing it to control you.
Right. That's the difference. We have to control it so it doesn't control us, and it can be done.
Yeah.
Apparently.
It's a great tool, and look at how the tools have evolved that we could do this on LinkedIn and have this conversation, and people could be joining in. And Kitty, I want to build on what you're encouraging the audience, because I see Nikki saying, hey, North Metro, Minnesota, shout out Nikki. She also says, you all look great. Thank you, Nikki. We love that. One of the things that happens in keynote experiences, we talk about the Q&A, and especially virtually, hey, if there's any questions, people want to chime in. I like to introduce the Q&A. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, share an idea of what's worked with you with connection too, because there's this beautiful sense of discovery going on right now of how people are building relationships in this new era. So if you've got something that you've done, seen, heard, observed, drop it in the chat, because I'd love to learn from, what's working for you out there too.
I love that. Okay, so kind of along those lines, I mean, speaking of, Q&A, and it reminds me of the keynote situation, which of course you take part in quite often and are really, really good at, because I've seen you. How can you elevate connection or how can we even elevate a connection in a keynote experience? So you just gave one example with the Q&A, but what are other things?
Make the audience an active participant. And get creative with how we do this. So in virtual, I love what we're doing right here. If I'm doing a keynote, one of the things I love to do is prepping with the client beforehand and interviewing people that'll be attending virtually. and understanding, one of the things that drives my passion is listening to defining conversations people have had in their lives. So if we're going virtual, going 7 to 10 minutes, and then disrupting that rhythm, disrupting that sameness, and bringing in feedback of, okay, what are your points of friction with connection? Boom. And then name checking that person, not just reading the comment, but being inclusive with their name. And then maybe another 10, 15 minutes later, I'll bring in a leader that I've interviewed, and then boom, we're split screen, and it's like a live broadcast where that person's sharing. Then we go back and forth with some, healthy follow-up questions. They're released, and then we continue on. So it's creating a sense of variety in the virtual realm. If we're in person, what I love to do is create an in-person breakout exercise. The traditional keynote has served us well for so long, but now I feel audiences are craving. They are craving that chance to connect and share. So having them share in the room, having a leader join on stage, and then creating that sense of spontaneity of, anybody want to come up on the hot seat and share? Boom, people start putting their hands up, and the spotlight is all about them. We have a message, but we're elevating the spotlight on them. And I found that's been really powerful and rewarding and moving in many cases. When people start sharing, they feel safe in the space and start sharing what's really going on with their teammates to create a closer sense of bond.
Right. I just want to interject here that it's funny, but in my career, very long career booking speakers, I remember a time when clients didn't want any part of that. They didn't want an opportunity for their people to speak because they were nervous of what, where that would lead. And I was always so surprised at that, because I was also aware, and we talked about this a little bit before this broadcast. We wish we would have recorded our conversation. It was so good.
Yeah.
But it was just about that. What happens in a room in a really good keynote speech that happens to be interactive, that's very engaging, that sparks a lot of ideas. And I think in our events today, creating that space, this was your comment, Riaz, about creating space for people to engage with each other and to share their ideas, ask their questions, all that kind of thing. We don't often do that at corporate events, at least yet. And I hope it's a trend that's going to change, because I've seen so much great stuff going on, and then it all goes back to the office and just drops because everybody's forgotten it. So I really like this question, both from the virtual standpoint and the live presentation. And I hope that everybody who's listening to this today or in the future will think about that when they're planning their own events.
Can I add something to that? Because I think this brings up something great as we, all collectively want to evolve an enriching experience. Creating a safe space for the leader that could share on stage is also very important. Yes. So as speakers, as production companies, what I love to do is help coach them beforehand of a framework of how they could share, what they feel comfortable with sharing, and coach them in, hey, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do this. Understand the hesitation, and that exercise can empower them to say, okay, you know what? I think I do want to share this with the group. And Kitty, if we were doing this, you go in front of the group and share something where they all look around and say, I never knew that about her. Like, that is so powerful. And they're grateful that you did that. And that, parlays the connection that happens afterwards. And Kris, to your point of having a traditional 45, 60-minute keynote, which could be great with Q&A, Q&I, and engagement back and forth, but also creating an application of the ideas. Yes. So what I've found is really been working well with clients is creating a connective exercise afterwards where they have a framework, where they're with a table, and then they're using the tools they've just been given, and then having a think, pair, share exercise where they're reflecting at the end of this of, this is how my perspective just shifted in the last 60 to 90 minutes. And people get excited to share because they've discovered something new that they're going to do differently when they go back to the office 8:01 Monday morning. So as presenters, as production companies, creating the space for application is so important to have this message resonate.
You're making me very happy right now.
Yeah.
I hope, I would imagine a lot of buyers are thinking the same thing. Because is having that, whatever you want to call it. I like application, but ROI, whatever, where people are actually learning, taking something home they can take action on right away is just gigantic. It's kind of why we do this, right? It's the reason you're bringing everybody together in the first place. Well, I think
keynotes are not what keynotes are not what keynotes used to be, basically.
No.
It's not a keynote speech, it's a keynote experience. And that's everything that you just talked about.
And we hope it keeps evolving.
And right. And one thing too is that, so Riaz, you probably won't remember this, but we saw you at WEC last year in San Francisco.
Oh yeah.
And
IASB.
Yes, that's right. Kris saw you there. But what's wonderful now is that the speakers, the talent, they don't just go out the back door after the event. They're visible. They're there within the event. You as an attendee actually have an opportunity to talk to the person afterward. And you won't remember this, but I caught up with you outside the convention center after your time on the stage, and we walked for a couple of blocks together. Right? It feels like you're meeting a celebrity, and you have this opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation. So I think it's great that it's not Elvis has left the building. You're actually there and able to have conversations with people. It's a really meaningful connection that's made.
That's cool. And that's kind of what we try to create a Please Welcome in the studio event, right? Like giving people a chance to talk to the speaker.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love this point. I love this point, Kitty. Like and Kris, because the conversations that happened before, I smile when sometimes speakers say, well, Riaz, how do you pump yourself up before a keynote? I'm like, I'm not doing jumping jacks backstage. I'm out talking to the audience because you're just building connection. And then it just feels like this inclusive conversation when I see and maybe share a moment of something you gave me in the presentation to bring you in. But what happens afterwards, where there's the opportunity to stay and be there for the reception, to me, I find that to be one of the greatest rewards, because when you walk into a room, sometimes you could be a complete stranger to the 100, 200, 2,000 people in that room, but their willingness to open up and share something vulnerable or honest about their own life, to me, shows that we served them today. And to hold space for that and learn what was useful and just have that bond, that is the greatest reward of doing this work, that you shifted something in their heart and in their mind. So absolutely, staying afterwards if you can, and you don't have to jump onto a flight. I try to do that anywhere I can.
Yeah.
That's so cool. All right, we're going to ask you the big question now.
All right.
I feel like we need a drum roll. What's the most important conversations you've had?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Can you literally nail that?
There is one. When I wrote the book, Every Conversation Counts, I had to do a deep dive on the most defining conversations in my life. And one of the most pivotal conversations, I think that's the word that I would describe it, happened when I was 22 years old. And at that time, this was 2001 going into 2002. I had a plan set that I was going to be an investment broker. You know, my mom and dad were like, go the finance route. I did my securities course, plan was set. Mom and dad didn't think so. They thought, hey, this is going to be a great, safe career path, right? And there was a student conference where I was asked to facilitate some sessions at, and the co-chair of that conference watched what I did on that stage, and he pulled me aside, and we were at a Burger King in Quebec afterwards, debriefing the conference, and he said, hey man, I know you've got your plan set with this whole finance route, but I don't think you should go that way. And I looked at him and I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I don't think you should do this. He's like, what I saw on that stage, I believe you have something to offer in the presentation space. I think you should go after that. And I remember thinking to him, and I remember this because we laugh about this to this day. This person's name is Lotfi. And I said, thank you for the belief. That is a great idea. And I said, but I'm also 22 years old. And if I'm not a doctor, lawyer, dentist, or some sort of financial expert, there's going to be a problem at home, right? And he said to me, when are you going to stop playing safe and start living your life?
Wow.
And I'll never forget this moment, because sometimes, and I liken this to a leader or just a person in your life that sees something in you before you see it in yourself. Because when you're making that leap of faith, which I ultimately ended up doing, I was going through imposter syndrome. I'm like, who am I to defect from a finance career and then try to pursue a career in television? And the thing I realized about not only the idea of, I ask myself, am I playing safe, is that if you don't have imposter syndrome, maybe that just means the goal isn't big enough. So now I lean into these moments. I just lean into these moments where I'm like, this feels really uncomfortable, but that is a good space to be, because if I embrace that discomfort, that is where growth will happen. If I fail, that is where growth will happen. But if I do this, there will not be any regrets. There will not be a what if, because we went for it. And that conversation that happened 20 years ago, I credit Laffy just leaning in, calling me out in a good way. And actually there was a difference, because he wasn't calling me out, he was calling me up. And I think that's the thing we can do for each other when we connect in meaningful ways.
That is incredible, because we hear so much about imposter syndrome and how we cannot have it. But what you just said is that we need to have it to have that growth and to reach that next level. That just shifted all of the narrative that I see on social media and everything about imposter syndrome. You just said the exact opposite. And what you said makes 100%
a world of difference.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Love that.
Imposters unite.
Yes.
Hug it out.
I can see the
man.
Now we're starting our own group. Well, thank you, Riaz. This has been eye-opening, but also really encouraging. I mean, honestly, it's like this stuff seems hard, and I know we have to practice it, but I think the payoffs are so phenomenal that I'm very encouraged and excited to learn more myself and start, flexing those muscles. Okay, I want to tell our listeners, for those of you who still have questions or have interest in Riaz to speak at your next event, feel free to reach out. I think we're going to put my email on there. If not, it's kcampbell@heroic-productions.com. So the letter K, Campbell like the soup, at heroic-productions.com. I'm always interested just to chat, by the way, to hear what challenges you're going through with your meetings and events, speakers or entertainment, the kinds of things you're facing, and we can brainstorm ideas together if you want.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's it for me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Riaz. So wonderful to see you and have you on our virtual stage. And from all of us here at Heroic Productions, thank you for tuning in today. Please share this episode. Share this far and wide. Go check out the other events over on our page. Don't forget to register for May 18th. Kris mentioned that earlier. That will be our in-studio experience at Studio 15 with Dr. Luana. It will be fabulous. And of course, for all of your event production needs, you can reach me at khart@heroic-productions.com, right down there below. We will help you make your next event heroic. And we will say farewell today, closing with just a little video about Please Welcome. McKenna, roll it. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Since 2004, the team here at Heroic has been setting the stage for brands of all shapes and sizes, helping their stories shine through in-person, virtual, and hybrid events. From strategy to creative, technical design, production, and complete run of show. Please Welcome is an event series experience that you can enjoy either as part of our studio audience or online. This is our opportunity to open our stage and welcome to our stage thought leaders, experts, entertainers, all with something really impactful to share, and all with amazing abilities to move people to action. Now, you might be asking, why? Why did we create Please Welcome? Well, we've been in the event industry a long time, and we know that when you infuse the right talent into any brand experience, you now have an opportunity to transform that experience from usual to unique, from mundane to memorable. And boy, do we have memorable for you.